Hello, history seekers. Did you know that the most infamous elephant execution in American history wasn't just a freak event, but the explosive climax of a deeply personal technological war? Before we dive deeper, understand this. Behind the public electrocution of Topsy at Coney Island in 1903 lies a tangled web of corporate desperation, media showmanship, scientific rivalry, and moral collapse. And today, we're going to unravel dark secrets that reveal what really happened and why history still hasn't forgiven it. If you love hidden history, hit subscribe and ring the bell, because today's journey goes far beyond the sanitized textbook version. The story of Topsy's death doesn't begin with her. It begins decades earlier, when Thomas Edison, already America's inventor hero, saw his electrical empire under threat from a Serbian immigrant named Nikola Tesla. Edison backed direct current. Tesla championed alternating current. To the public, this looked like a technical debate. In reality, it was the kind of turf war that scars reputations for a century. Edison had built his fame on control of patents, laboratories, and publicity. But AC had advantages he couldn't spin away. It traveled farther, cost less, and scaled better. Edison knew it. His investors knew it. Even his own engineers privately admitted the future belonged to Tesla's system. That fear set the entire nightmare in motion. You might ask, why would a respected inventor ever sink to tactics we'd associate today with propaganda ministries? The answer is simple. Edison hated losing, not in a petty way, but in a way that made him willing to weaponize science, public safety, and eventually an elephant, just to make AC look dangerous. His pride demanded it. His business depended on it. Edison and his allies launched what newspapers later called the War of the Currents. Their strategy: make AC look deadly by staging public spectacles. Homeless men were shocked to death in demonstrations. Dogs, calves, and horses were electrocuted in front of crowds. Edison's team even helped design the first electric chair using AC, knowing full well what message it would send. This is Tesla's power. They wanted people to think it kills, but the campaign didn't work fast enough. By the late 1890s, AC was everywhere, powering streetcars, lighting cities, and fueling industrial boomtowns. Edison had been outmaneuvered technically, and now he was being humiliated publicly. He needed a final blow, something so shocking, so unforgettable, that people would associate AC with death for the rest of their lives. That final blow would tragically land on Topsy, an elephant who had never asked to be part of anyone's war. Topsy was no ordinary elephant. Smuggled into the United States illegally as a baby, a crime in itself, she grew up in the chaotic, often abusive world of traveling circuses. Trainers used hooks, whips, and beatings. By adulthood, Topsy was massive, intelligent, unpredictable, and understandably hostile toward the people who mistreated her. Circus owners loved branding animals as violent to excuse their own cruelty, and Topsy became the perfect scapegoat. When workers provoked her or struck her, she fought back, and every incident, no matter how justified, was written up in sensational papers as proof she was a killer. The public never heard her side, only the drama. By 1902, Topsy had been sold to Luna Park on Coney Island, a place obsessed with spectacle. They quickly learned that an elephant labeled dangerous was an opportunity. People would pay to see her, fear her, or gossip about her. But Topsy's owners wanted one more show, a final one. that would draw maximum crowds. As cruel as it sounds, they planned to execute her publicly. One of the men involved proposed killing her by feeding her cyanide-laced carrots, while thousands watched. Another wanted her hanged with a crane. Journalists weren't far behind, ready to turn her death into a media circus. The owners needed a method, both dramatic and scientific. That's where the Edison connection begins to creep in. Now, here's the critical truth most people never hear. Edison did not directly own Luna Park, nor did he personally arrange Topsy's execution. But his film company still worked under his name, and his long public campaign linking AC to death made electrocution as spectacle feel normal, even educational. It was the perfect setup for him to step in. When reporters asked whether his engineers could help kill an elephant safely, Edison saw an opportunity he couldn't resist. It let him reinforce his old narrative without saying a word about Tesla. A filmed electrocution using AC would speak for itself. And so, Edison's camera crew packed their equipment for Coney Island. On January 4th, 1903, thousands gathered near the unfinished Luna Park construction site. Workers chained Topsy between two posts, wrapped her legs with copper electrodes, and soaked the ground in salt water to increase conductivity. The crowd stood back, both curious and uneasy. Newspapers had hyped the event. Now people wanted to see whether electricity could really kill the largest land mammal in North America. Edison's film team positioned their cameras carefully. They weren't there for humanitarian reasons. They were there to capture the death in full view, crisp, centered, and reproducible on film reels that could be shipped nationwide. This wasn't an accident, it was strategy. Electrocuting an elephant would become one of the earliest viral videos in American history. Topsy didn't thrash, charge, or rebel. According to witnesses, she looked confused but calm, perhaps resigned, a heartbreaking reminder that she had no idea why she was being strapped to the ground like a criminal. A handler fed her one last carrot. Then engineers sent 6,600 volts of AC through her body. She collapsed instantly. Smoke rose from her feet. Her body stiffened, then toppled. The crowd gasped, recoiled, and fell silent. Some ran, others stared. It was over in seconds. Edison's crew got exactly what they wanted. The moment Topsy's body hit the ground, the moral tone of the crowd shifted. People who'd arrived expecting a thrilling spectacle suddenly found themselves staring at the charred corpse of a creature that had never deserved any of this. A few onlookers vomited, others cried. Reporters struggled to describe the scene without sounding complicit. The scientific demonstration that Edison's circle framed as humane looked more like a public lynching dressed up with wires. But the most disturbing reaction came after the crowd dispersed. Edison's team packed their equipment, not with remorse, but with the satisfaction of having captured something unique, something grotesque enough to draw attention, yet educational enough to be justified under the banner of public science. They knew the footage would travel. They knew it would provoke. And they knew it would subtly reinforce the message Edison had been pushing for years. AC equals death. The film was released within weeks. People who had never heard of Topsy suddenly found themselves watching her die in Nickelodeon's lecture halls and local theaters. The footage spread across states faster than any written editorial possibly could. And though Edison avoided mentioning Tesla by name, the implication was obvious. Two audiences already confused by the electrical debates of the era. The execution looked like confirmation that alternating current was inherently monstrous. There was just one problem. The public reaction was not what Edison expected. Crowds recoiled. City editors published angry letters condemning animal cruelty. Religious leaders denounced the stunt from pulpits. Even some engineers, men who understood the physics, said the demonstration felt like a violation of basic decency. Instead of associating AC with danger, people began associating Edison with barbarity. The film backfired precisely because it forced viewers to confront a moral line they didn't realize had been crossed. For many ordinary Americans, Topsy's death wasn't a triumph of science. It was a mirror held up to an age obsessed with spectacle, and the reflection was ugly. Edison never signed the execution order. Legally, he wasn't responsible, but morally, his years of sensational demonstrations, animal electrocutions, and public fear-mongering normalized the idea that electricity, especially AC, could and should be used to teach society lessons. Without that groundwork, Luna Park's owners might never have considered electrocution at all. Edison's fingerprints were invisible, but unmistakable. Dig through original police reports, eyewitness accounts, and circus logs, and a pattern emerges. Nearly every incident involving Topsy followed abuse by a handler. She wasn't unpredictable, she was reacting to violence. The killer elephant label was manufactured to sell tickets and justify mistreatment. In reality, she behaved like a traumatized animal fighting back against cruelty. She had no other way to escape. Despite official claims of safety or necessity, Luna Park's owners wanted a show. Early flyers hinted at a grand event. Reporters wrote about it breathlessly, as if covering a prize fight. The public responded because they were conditioned to see exotic animals as disposable tools of amusement. Without this grotesque hunger for spectacle, the crowd would have been a handful of officials, not thousands of thrill-seekers. The film of Topsy's execution wasn't neutral documentation. It was edited, titled, and distributed like a warning, one that leaned into the narrative Edison had built for years. Viewers weren't meant to focus on Topsy. They were meant to think about the unseen killer lurking in America's wires. It was emotional manipulation, masquerading as scientific education. Historical electrical tests show that far lower voltages could have killed an elephant. Engineers knew this. Using 6,600 volts wasn't about efficiency, it was about dramatic effect. The violent collapse, the smoke rising from Topsy's feet, the dramatic instant death, all of it made for a cleaner, more shocking film. The goal wasn't mercy, it was theatricality. Though newspapers had once played along with Edison's stunts, Topsy's execution pushed journalists past their limit. Articles harshly criticized the event. Progressive activists demanded animal welfare laws. Some early film critics questioned whether the camera was encouraging cruelty by turning suffering into entertainment. This backlash contributed to a growing realization that technology needed ethical boundaries, not just patents and profits. For decades, many believed Edison personally ordered the execution. That myth grew because the film carried his name and because the event fit neatly into the villain versus hero narrative built around Edison and Tesla. Only in recent years have historians clarified the nuances, but even now, popular culture clings to the simpler story. The tragic part. The myth overshadows the real issue, a society that allowed spectacle to justify cruelty. In the weeks after the execution, Luna Park rushed to promote its grand opening. The owners pretended Topsy had been a dangerous threat removed for public safety. But privately, they knew the backlash had hurt them. They stopped advertising the execution. Reporters stopped asking questions. It became a taboo topic, a stain too dark to polish. Edison, too, sensed the shifting public mood. He quietly distanced himself from the event. He never bragged about the film, never referenced it in interviews, and eventually, even his closest supporters stopped defending it. The War of the Currents was effectively over. Tesla's AC had won, and Edison's final attempt to sway public opinion had become an enduring symbol of desperation. The film itself survived, copied and recopied by archivists as early cinema history. Ironically, it no longer serves the purpose Edison intended. Today, it circulates as evidence of early 20th century cruelty and technological arrogance, a warning about what happens when scientific power outpaces empathy. Modern viewers don't see a demonstration. They see a betrayal. They see a society so numb to suffering that it applauded the death of a creature it had already broken. Topsy's story faded for decades, but it never truly disappeared. Archivists, early film scholars, and animal rights historians eventually rediscovered the footage and the newspaper reports. What they discovered wasn't just an elephant's death. It was a clear example of how society can justify cruelty when entertainment and business mix. Topsy became a symbol, not of danger, but of how innocence can be crushed under the machinery of progress. In recent years, historians have tried to restore her dignity by telling her full story, not just the final 90 seconds captured on film. They've traced her origins, her mistreatment, her attempted survival in a world designed to exploit her, and the cynical forces that turned her last day into a media event. In doing so, they've reframed Topsy not as an exhibit, but as a victim of a society addicted to spectacle. Her death has also sparked renewed discussions about the ethics of technology. When does innovation drift into exploitation? When does documentation become voyeurism? And how often do we justify harm by calling it education or progress? Topsy forces us to confront those questions without flinching. She exposes the dark corners of early modernity and reminds us that cruelty often hides behind claims of efficiency or science. Today, the War of the Currents is remembered as a triumph of innovation, with Tesla hailed as a visionary and Edison as a relentless, occasionally ruthless businessman. But Topsy's execution complicates that narrative. It reveals that great inventors are not always great men, and that progress can be stained with moral failures we prefer to ignore. The incident forces us to rethink hero worship and ask harder questions about the people who shape our world. Tesla, for his part, never commented publicly on the execution, but historians generally agree he would have found it abhorrent. His writings express admiration for animals and repeated frustration with how corporations twisted science into propaganda. In that sense, Topsy's death stands as a grim reminder that the War of the Currents wasn't just a technical debate, it was a clash of philosophies, with innocent lives caught in the crossfire. Edison's defenders often argue he was a product of his era. But even in 1903, the moral revulsion of onlookers shows that people understood the line had been crossed. The shock wasn't just in the electricity. It was in the realization that progress had been weaponized against a creature who didn't understand why she was being punished. In that moment, society glimpsed the cost of unrestrained ambition. So what do we take from Topsy's story today? First, that history isn't just shaped by inventions and victories, but by the casualties left behind. Topsy reminds us that when technology races ahead without ethical guardrails, the vulnerable suffer first. Second, her death exposes the dangerous power of narrative, how a person like Edison could frame cruelty as science, and how a society eager for entertainment could believe it. And finally, Topsy forces us to confront our own responsibilities. Are there modern technologies we treat with the same moral blindness? Are we repeating patterns of exploitation because the results feel impressive or necessary? Or have we learned enough from the past to demand empathy alongside innovation? These are uncomfortable questions, but asking them is the only way to honor the life taken in the name of progress. If Topsy's story moved you, tell me what part struck hardest and how you think history should remember her. Join the discussion below, share your thoughts, and help keep these forgotten lessons alive. And if you want more hidden stories that challenge the way we see the past, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a deep dive.